comfortable playing the Hecarim when they were so afraid of it, or was the Karthus a higher priority pick?
And now with the Karthus still available, it leaves the question, will Splyce look to ban it, or will they hand it over to Fnatic? I've had a lot of conversations with Xerxe and his perception of Karthus. He thinks he's the best Karthus in Europe. I know he's confident on the pick, but it looks like that Fnatic is saying we're happy to leave it open, and if it is up, we'll grab it for ourselves.
Well, a couple seconds to figure that one out. Kayle was the last ban from Splyce's perspective. Targeting Nemesis, he picked up a pentakill last weekend on that champion, and also he was the first member of Fnatic on stage 25 minutes before draft, getting into the zone, waking up, and the Karthus is locked in. During the regular season, Ivern was a pick that was run several times into that pick, and I want to see what Xerxe's answer will be.
So this feels like now, Splyce, that see that there's the Karthus there. It's kind of the general consensus that if you reach 15 minutes in the game and Karthus and the team are at parity, they have not been put behind, that he is just an unstoppable force. So what you're going to see is Splyce are very quickly going to double down on playing in the early game, on playing for the lanes, and try to abuse this Karthus, which is why we see picks like the Jayce and Zoe.
What I also find quite interesting is by blind picking the Jayce here, they're saying you can't pick something like the Vladimir up and towards the top lane, have that outscale option as well, because then you're going to be locked into this triple AP situation. So they're going to be forced into something that will likely be not a very good matchup towards the top side of the map, which is really important for Splyce, because something that Vizicsacsi does so well, or often likes to do, is generate pressure in a side lane, but is often a fault of his as well.
Well, the Syndra is locked in. 2 games played, both of them victories for Nemesis. And the last few seconds of this Phase 1 draft will be the Jarvan, most likely for Bwipo.
And I'm sure fans have already noticed that you're going to constantly see kind of this trade-off of Lissandra, Zoe, and Syndra. These are kind of like the 3 blind pickable champions for the mid lane. And so when you see Lissandra pushed away, it's either going to be Zoe or Syndra. And over the course of all these playoffs and this best of 5, you're just going to see this merry-go-round of what the mid laners grab that's available.
And now I'm looking at Splyce for jungle picks. Rek'Sai has to be high in the priority list. By going Rek'Sai with the Zoe, not only do you have a very strong 2 versus 2, but you also have an early game impact jungler that goes back to this game 3 that Splyce had against SK, where they drafted the 1-3-1. They had strong early impact, and they transitioned into a very effective mid game. And I feel like that when you're drafting yourself the Tahm Kench to be able to move along to these side lanes rather, you need to have a good early lead in order to set that up.
I distinctly remember, Vedius, you're talking a lot about the Tahm Kench with Splyce's play last weekend, which I want to revisit in game. Bans in Phase 2, Pyke and Irelia find themselves removed from the pool, as well as Rakan, so a lot of support's being removed.
Yeah, 2 big comfort picks for Hylissang as well. Note that the Braum, Pyke, and Rakan, all of his most played champions, have now been removed, kind of edging him towards something like the Alistar. Not the best matchup up against Tahm Kench, but the Thresh is another option that this Fnatic bot lane could look towards if they so choose.
It's that kind of idea of Norskeren and Hilly are both playmaking-oriented supports, and while Norskeren can make plays on the Tahm Kench, normally you see it as a defensive lane, and we know that Rekkles and Hilly have been playing all for that all-in. They were the first team in the LEC to pull out the galley of support, so I hope that this is something like an Alistar paired with another hard carry ADC, but it could also open up the option for Rekkles to look for his Sivir, since the Alistar pick from Splyce on the other side wouldn't deny it.
Okay, so Sivir's available is a signature pick for Rekkles, currently being hovered. You mentioned the Rek'Sai a few moments ago. Vedius, it was locked in there for Xerxe. And as we can see, just a few moments to play out. This Rekkles Sivir, it is one of his all-time most played. It is confirmed. And Hylissang, with his champion pool being pinched, now needs to round out the team composition.
So Fnatic have drafted themselves very solid lanes. They have a very well-rounded comp. They have much more of a 1-4 rather than a 1-3-1, but the cool thing about Karthus is he changes that dynamic a little bit, thanks to his ultimate. But fundamentally, they have very strong team fighting, and if they reinforce this with a ranged support, it's very much about enable Rekkles to do damage from the backline and basically just carry these team fights. But we know that Broxah on the Karthus can have a huge impact in the early game. He's done it multiple times before. If he gets kills early, things are going to be very difficult for Splyce to turn things around.
Well, a few seconds left to play out. The Alistar was secured to join Rekkles Sivir, and you touched on that, Karthus. Broxah has played that champion 5 times, undefeated, 28-4-28. And to round out the team composition here for Splyce, it's a little bit of a pivot there. It's the Corki that will most likely be played there by Kobbe in the bottom lane.
So what is cool is kind of this relationship that Splyce are showing with a lot of their flex picks, not just in this best of 5, but in their previous one. The fact that they had the Vel'Koz, and it was a question, is it going to go to the ADC position or into the mid lane position? There's a very similar thing here with the Zoe and the Corki. You've seen both champions play them in either position, and you can see that they're kind of hot potatoing around about where is it going to land, how are you going to spec your runes?
Question is, what does it do for the draft overall? I see a lot of poke going in, but what do you see here, Betty?
So, the first thing to know is that we have a Zoe in the bot lane.
Right.
This will be the shift going over towards Splyce. Really interesting decision making, largely because I think that with the spell shield, it's quite easy to block the Sleepy Trouble bubble, and it's very telegraphed ability as well. So I think it's going to be difficult for them to set that up. Maybe they'll look to try and attack the Alistar during the laning phase. Very interested to see how this lane matchup will play out. But regardless of that, overall team comp from Splyce, a lot of poke, an ability to play on multiple side lanes. I think they have excellent scaling as well. Corki, Zoe, Jayce, from afar, they are very difficult to play around. And the one cool thing about this comp is it can be very difficult to engage on because of the amount of mobility, the Tahm Kench, the Jayce speed, the Drowsy, all that. So if Fnatic try to force a fight around Baron or Dragon, fun fact, these guys can just kill you from over the wall. It becomes very difficult to play around those big objectives. So Splyce have basically said, you know what? If you try to force us to fight, we're going to be ready for it.
Oh, so many exciting decisions here for the players to showcase in the first game. Of course, with that Zoe in the bottom lane, Kobbe, the man in front for Splyce, is playing his 15th unique champion. And you can see what it's like to play against his Zoe if you tune into Rekkles' POV over at twitch.tv/RiotGames2. Ladies and gentlemen, it's the first game of Fnatic taking on Splyce. Now, I'm instantly going to turn my attention some of the summoner spells here. 2 teleports on the side of Fnatic, 3 on the side of Splyce. And it's going to be very fun to see how these lanes play out because of that Corki and that Zoe. It's not something that we've seen a whole hell of a lot here.
And I still want to urge people that this probably could have flipped either way. It could have been Humanoid that took the Zoe. It could have been Kobbe that took the Corki. I feel like Corki slotted into this well because of its ability to itemize and hex Strinker if he really needs to absorb a lot of that burst damage that would come out of Nemesis' Syndra.
So it's what I find fascinating about this draft from Splyce overall is that Corki lanes you can't really gank or play around, right? There's not much setup. Rek'Sai definitely has a lot of damage with the flash knocker, but because there's no follow-up CC, it's going to be difficult to play the Syndra. Ganking bot is kind of where I'd look at for Splyce, but then Alistar Sivir can be very challenging because of how much disruption Alistar has, the spell shield on Sivir as well. So I kind of look at this comp and I'm thinking, well, they've drafted Rek'Sai, a very typically early game focused jungler, someone who's very invested on getting his lane as a head, and he doesn't have actually that many lanes that he could try to snowball, which makes me wonder what kind of decision-making and pathing Xerxe has in mind with regards to the early game for Splyce.
I feel like their big power window that Splyce really want to attack with this composition is actually post the package as well as having access to Abyssal Voyage.
Yeah.
The thing about Rek'Sai is that we know that she's incredible at skirmishing, but think of how much control you have over the map, especially the bottom side of the map on Splyce's composition, when you have someone like Zoe, long-range pick potential, when you have someone like Tahm Kench, the ability to collapse from afar. So I feel like Splyce will probably play this a bit safe, get all of those ultimates, and then start blitzing into Broxah's jungle and try to eat up Fnatic's bottom side of their map. So dragon spawns, especially early infernals, would be really valuable to them.
Well, the first one is in fact coming up shortly, and you talked a lot about the early game impact. Youngblood actually had a great tweet earlier today where he talked about the early game decision making and how he's prepared coming into this game. He said, looking forward to the challenge of playing Splyce today. For the first time in a long time, we, being Fnatic, have had to look at themselves, knowing how well Splyce have prepared. And Vedius, we saw this last weekend as well, how Splyce improved upon some of their weaknesses from the regular season, going into that matchup against SK. And there's all eyes going to be on Xerxe, one of the stars of last weekend's series.
Splyce also have this history of taking favorites to 5 games. We saw it last split up against Schalke. We've seen it multiple times against G2 as well. And ultimately, these guys always result in a very exciting series. And I feel like that when you look at this match as well, I know many fans look at Fnatic as very heavy favorites. The Twitter poll was 3-0 in Fnatic's favor. But I feel like that what Fnatic do very well is they're very good at cookie cutter League of Legends. They have very good players, they draft very standard, they don't do anything surprising or special. You look at that composition, there's nothing new or unique here. This is almost like staple signature picks across the board for Fnatic, and that's one of the good and bad things about them, is that when they get their comfort, they are so terrifyingly strong, but at the same time, it allows Splyce to be creative and come up with new ways of dealing with Fnatic because they almost know what to expect.
And then the question is, you know, if Splyce are successful in this game one with more of a creative draft as opposed to what we saw for kind of the cookie cutter regular season, then it opens up so much harder drafting principles for Fnatic continuing in this best of 5. It's just completely different mind games. But if Splyce fail here, I feel like we're going to go see them return to form, and it's all going to be about the team fighting, the scaling, the classic Splyce that we know works.
Yeah, exactly. It's nice to know that Splyce have another gear to fall back onto. And in the early game, small gold advantage for Fnatic. You can see the CS lead in the bottom lane for Rekkles, plus 14. As, whoa, Xerxe is going to get solo killed here. Not just yet. Xerxe puts the hammer down. Bwipo is fancying a shot, not going to be able to do it.
He needs to be very careful. That was like looking for flag, flash auto with the passive.
Yeah, very surprised that Vizicsacsi even got that low in that 1v1 matchup. Typically, the Jayce up against Jarvan can be a little bit more obnoxious for him, but to get that low, the risk of nearly dying, very surprising. Great stuff there from Bwipo.
And what I was saying, just before Xerxe got dunked on by Bwipo, is that Kobbe with that teleport is falling behind in CS. I think somewhat to be expected in the early levels. You can see Rekkles has already picked up the Fairy Charm and the pickaxe, and Kobbe's still sitting on that cooldown, so he still needs to pick up some sort of mana regen before he can come back into lane, and Xerxe is able to sidestep the flag and drag, gets a good reverse trade onto Bwipo, and knocks him away.
So what you can see is that the shield from Bwipo actually makes these trades very favorable, and remember that Bwipo will normally put points in his Q, which applies armor shred as well. So every time he lands it and he goes into these long fist fights, he's actually doing a lot more damage in the early game than Jayce can, who has to go through all these additional stats and is much harder to trade against.
Hold up. Holding. Devour was used for a few seconds. Kobbe forced backwards. Remember, still has not back. Sitting on that corrupting potion only. Rekkles and Hilly are shoving this wave and keeping the pressure on Splyce's bot lane.
Yeah, it's a rough back timer there for Kobbe. It's going to feel a lot better when he gets back into his lane. But the core thing about having someone like a Zoe in the bot lane is it's just there for the wave clear, but she needs more points in her abilities before she can contest with Rekkles' Sivir's wave clear.
Yeah, the Lost Chapter is a really big item spike as well for Osk. I feel that when you look at Zoe in the bot lane, she's going to struggle. We saw it from Perks very early on in the season as well. And you can just see how Zoe is kind of struggling to even farm underneath her tower for a lot of it. But I love that trade that we saw just before Kobbe went back to base as well, because it demonstrated why Kobbe has to play so safe in the early laning phase. Because Alistar, his ability to all in onto a low mobility champion this early into the game is very easy, so he can set up for early advantages in the bot side of the map.
And of course, Rekkles versus Kobbe was one of the pre-match showdowns that was talked a lot about. These stats not necessarily indicative of the game we're going to see because it's a Zoe versus Sivir, but the huge CSD that leans into Rekkles' favor is some very impressive statistics.
But you say that, however, it kind of represents what we often see from these two players as well, because when you think about Rekkles, he is a guy that's often very lane dominant. He likes to win his lane, whereas Kobbe, he's more of the team fighter. He's much more playing towards the later stages, and you kind of look at this draft, you think he's definitely picking more for the team rather than just to make himself stand out.
I personally feel that a lot of that is also on the responsibility of the supports, both Norskeren and Hilly. Hilly, a bit more experience, especially in this specific duo alongside Rekkles. I feel is just like super confident, very momentum-based player. And Norskeren, I feel like he's looking at being a Hilly maybe in a couple more splits. Like he's got the playmaking and the talent behind him. Now he just needs the confidence and the experience to match it.
Maybe taking down Hylissang will be a gigantic step on that path for Frodkurinn. We're 7 minutes in, and Xerxe is getting close to that ultimate. No real attempts from either jungler on the laners. Bwipo's got Flash and Cataclysm available if Xerxe decides to go in. Ooh. There's the flash already used.
So the thing is you're going to see Xerxe spend a lot of time up near Vizicsacsi, if not just kind of shadowing underneath him, at least controlling vision. Because for Jayce to really be effective in this lane, he does need to have the push and try to abuse a lot of that range, which means he's going to be forward in his lane, he's going to expose himself. So Xerxe is going to constantly be shadowing underneath this, not just looking for kill opportunity, but to keep Xerxe safe.
Now, if anybody watched Fnatic last weekend, Bwipo survived a number of 1v2 attempts. Does he have the moves to pull this one off. The wave is pushing in now, and Xerxe can't really decide if he wants to go for the tower dive.
The dangerous thing about going for a tower dive is that Karthus is now level 6. The ultimate can swing a dive very rapidly, just as we saw last week. And I think that Xerxe is respecting that, especially when Bwipo has plenty of health. He is surprisingly tanky this early in the game. And so both junglers will just trade blue buffs for the time being. This will force Kobbe and Norskeren to play a little bit more defensively than they already have been because of the risk of a potential dive.
And both teams have just been really good at recognizing where their strong side of the map is and just making sure that they're playing to it. Now, I feel like this favors Fnatic slightly just because Splyce are a team that have one of the average longest game times, and the sheer scaling potential of a Karthus and a Sivir, again, on parity if they're not put behind, is just absolutely devastating. So I'd like to see Splyce, now that they have access to the package, access to the Abyssal Voyage soon, start to speed up the tempo of this game and try to throw some wrench into
the pings, they're coming.
Wow, Kobbe and Norskeren going to try to turn this one around. Here comes Humanoid, throws down the package from the Valkyrie. Rekkles forced to flash defensively. Hilly's holding on to his for now. Kobbe's trying to step forward. He's got an Ignite to use as well. Battlestar puts the damage down. Hilly's down to 200 HP. First Blood's available, secured, picked up by Kobbe and Splyce.
Very surprised that Fnatic didn't respect that. They had vision in the river. They should have seen the movement down. What it results in is a big win for Splyce. They find First Blood, they equalize the gold, and they shut down the support.
And this is the window that we're looking for. Norskeren now has access to the Abyssal Voyage. It's level 6, so you can see rinse repeat plays exactly like that. Splyce should have total control over this river. That makes it very dangerous for Rekkles and Hilly to be that far forward.
Well, really, really nicely done. Splyce managed to pick up First Blood in 3 out of the 4 games last weekend. They do it again today. I believe Humanoid walked behind the Dragon Pit, avoiding that pink ward in the river. So Splyce stay even on gold, but remember, Kobbe is down 30 CS. He is still behind 200 gold from Rekkles because of the good CS numbers. So Splyce have done a great job of negating some of that early weakness, Frosk, but they still need to do a little bit more to ramp Kobbe up.
But it's also, you know, what does 30 CS mean between a Sivir and a Zoe, especially when you have a person like Corki on your team? It's not like we expect Kobbe to be like the ridiculous damage that comes out from this team. Corki can do that in the late game. Sivir's going to get the CS for free anyway because she's just going to be a farmhouse. While this looks bad on paper, I actually don't think it hurts in the long run between these two champions and the responsibilities to their teams.
Well, very nice. And of course, we've got many, many minutes to watch how this plays out. The minion wave is going to help protect Rekkles as he gets caught by a Sleepy Trouble bubble. And Broxah looking to set up his first gank, waiting in the tri-bush, but I believe he was spotted up by a ward. Kobbe and Norskeren. There's only one flash between them in the bottom lane, and Broxah's unable to find any potential follow-ups here. So it's just push city, as Bwipo is now going to be punished. Here comes Xerxe. He's got the flash, he's got the chilling smite, he's got Void Rush as well. Cataclysm comes down, Requiem will follow, but Jayce survives thanks to the stopwatch, and that is a gigantic cooldown from Broxah that will not find a kill.
Beautiful stuff from Splyce. They're continuing to find these early leads. We asked this question at the beginning of the game, but Fnatic want to try and answer back as Rekkles will find nothing. Splyce slowly starting to recruit this gold lead, and again, one of the questions we asked was, what kind of Splyce will show up? Will they try and go to comfort? Will they try and scale? Or will they look to match Fnatic in the early game? And so far, they've made a package play, they've made a successful gank, and they are 2 kills up over Fnatic.
And it looks like they're succeeding where Vitality really couldn't. Vitality threw everything in the kitchen sink to try to break Fnatic, especially Bwipo, up in this top side, and they just couldn't make it count. Xerxe, on the other hand, did make it count, but can he snowball the game where Cabochard couldn't?
Well, Vizicsacsi 0-0-1. Got that CS advantage and sitting pretty comfortable up against Bwipo. While Xerxe was picking up the Rift Herald in the top lane, down in the bottom, Fnatic were able to secure the Mountain Drake. They also got themselves 2 plates from the bottom tower. They've got 1 plate in the middle tower, so Fnatic sitting pretty happy with that plate gold. You can see Xerxe and Humanoid cheating towards the top half of the map, while Chachi's looking to even out the total plates killed by putting a lot of damage on this top outer.
Yeah, if our observers could very quickly toggle the vision, you can actually just see the differences. We run out of time as Xerxe goes for a gank.
Yes, he does. Bwipo's in so much trouble. Void Rush should just be about enough. Vizicsacsi takes down Bwipo, and Splyce are absolutely dominating the kill count. They are in control of the enemy champions, and they're up 500 kill.
And this sums up perfectly the kind of tendency differences, or something you can expect from Fnatic. Remember what we said, that Fnatic is very cookie cutter. You can almost know what to expect from this team, and one of the things they often do is play around bot lane. And the reason why I wanted to highlight the vision was because you can see everything is invested towards the bot side of the map for Fnatic. They drafted Zoe, Tahm Kench, a very defensive lane, and while they did find a Corki package play, the whole game plan for Splyce has actually been to play around top side, try and get Vizicsacsi ahead on the Jayce, and so far they are finding success, whereas Fnatic is finding very little.
It's also just a great read from Splyce to say, okay, just leave bot lane, let's throw everything up into the top side, let's try to break the tower as quickly as possible. That said, because it was a mountain dragon, in fact double mountain, I don't know if this is going to pay off unless they can really get this rolling and try to snowball into much more Rift Herald control when that objective does spawn.
Well,
which, there it goes.
It is available, so the plate gank going to be used in the mid lane. Bring that Rift Herald up. Tower First Blood is available in the top lane here for Chachi. One big boop will take down at least one of those plates. A couple more hits. Oh, so nicely done. Humanoid just gets out of range of Hylissang, so he's able to back away, get some plate gold, and Splyce continue to stay 1,000 gold up as we get to 15 minutes on the clock. Bwipo's not done yet. Cataclysm is available. Chachi's run out of mana, though. Now, Requiem is on cooldown. It's not available for use for a few more moments. Bwipo's going to get turned around. Here comes Kobbe. He teleports in. Sleepy, Trouble, Bubble. Paddlestar's not going to be enough, but the Void Rush surely will. There goes Xerxe. Dashes in, bites down. Spin for the win. Xerxe picks up the 4th kill for Splyce.
And Bwipo just needs to lose gracefully at this point. Way overforced that fight. I felt like he was trying to look for the Requiem cooldown. It just wasn't there in time. And unfortunately, he just looks like a fool that far overextended in the lane.
Ends up being first tower going in favor of Fnatic, but Splyce immediately trade. And Frost, I completely agree with you. I can understand what Bwipo was trying to do. We can see the Requiem was up 1 or 2 more hits, that would have been a kill, but he didn't respect the teleport on Kobbe. He didn't realize that Xerxe, funnily enough, playing towards topside as he has the entire game, and it meant that there was no way for him to escape. Fnatic find themselves down another kill, and their top lane is now 0-3, where this Rek'Sai and Jayce duo is only getting stronger and stronger.
And frankly, the only play that I've been a bit 50-50 on that Splyce have made this game so far was that Rift Herald play in the mid lane. I feel like they didn't have proper information about where Fnatic was to make it count, but you know, if they're able to push this down, send all 5 members now because they've unlocked the entire map, then it won't matter.
That's so interesting. The way that these lanes have played out, Vizicsacsi doing so well in the top lane with the help of Xerxe. He's up 40 CS. He's 1-0-2 on Jayce. He played it last weekend. He went unkilled the entire game. So 3-0-3 in that performance. Now on the flip side, Rekkles is sitting up 40 CS in the bot lane on his most played professional champion at 45 games. And we need to see which lever can be utilized to help the team pick up the win.
Now, one of the cool things about Splyce's composition is the triple teleport that they're running. This means they can send anyone to a side lane. You'll notice they've currently got Zoe in the mid, but Corki is up top side, Vizicsacsi is bot. The reason why they've put the Jayce down in the bot lane is because his TP is on cooldown, and Drake will be the next big objective that both these teams will look to play around. Corki with his TP can just safely sit at the top side, whereas they don't want to send Rekkles up there because they won't have the wave clear, and he's the only one with teleport. Nemesis has a heal, so they can't send him up there, so Jarvan is just kind of haphazardly trying to clear waves, moving with his team, and Splyce are the ones that should have the better position right now to set up for this objective and force Fnatic into an awkward situation.
And of course, you can see the amount of gold that each individual has accrued over the course of the game, and the positioning around Dragon has already started. Requiem is up for Broxah. He doesn't yet have level 11, but 2 Mountain Drakes going the way of Fnatic is not something Splyce want to abide by, which is why they are contesting the vision and trying to challenge.
We've heard professionals all over the globe talk about how broken Mountain Drake can be in that it unlocks early Baron access, especially when you have a Syndra, her burst damage, that you basically never be able to outsmite it, and then having double Mountain on top. But the thing is that Splyce need to be very patient and controlled when setting up their 1-3-1. They have all the tools that they can force Fnatic to not even look for the fight, to possibly get the Drake for free, but Fnatic hard want to force this fight. That's where their composition feels comfortable.
Notice how sneaky Fnatic are being right now. They know that Splyce invested all of their vision towards the top side of the river, but a lot of this bottom side is actually very dark, and Fnatic were utilizing that to try and find a pick onto Chachi. But now the Drake is up. Splyce have control over the river. They're starting this one off.
All right, Splyce trying to use some of that poke to keep Fnatic at bay. Not fully committing to the objective nor the fight. Backing away as Nemesis avoids the Sleepy Trouble bubble.
Know how Fnatic have the bot wave pushed, and no one has it in control right now. Fnatic look for an engage.
All right, Xerxe's going to be the target. He gets jumped on, run down, and easily killed. Splyce were backing away, and Xerxe did not get the memo.
Now, they will make a nice trade here by getting decent damage on the mid lane tower, possibly the mid lane tower. There they go. That feels good. But this was Splyce just not being patient enough with their composition and possibly getting more for it.
That was so cheeky! To the skies, gets Chachi out the Cataclysm, but it simply is not enough. Another isolated death, just about, as Norskeren completes the Abyssal Voyage. Chachi caught out, ultimate from Norskeren used. Yes, Splyce got the tower, but Fnatic got the second mountain.
And the thing is that Splyce had optimal setup for the vast majority, but let's backtrack to when we said Fnatic were being very sneaky. They set up those control walls towards the bot side, which meant that Splyce could not confidently push out that wave. There was still a tower there, which meant that they never had priority on the bottom wave, and the moment that no one was going to deal with it, Splyce split apart, Fnatic engaged, and then they end up being the ones coming out on top.
And now my concern is, Vedius, is that you have a team that has double mountain and great Baron burn if they ever approach it. This is like a huge target on the map that when Baron spawns, Fnatic can very easily pull Splyce in because Splyce has to answer it, and a 1-3-1 composition can really struggle around the Baron unless they land massive poke before the fight happens.
Good thing this is a poke comp then, isn't it, Frost? Because you've also got the Jayce, the Corki, the
Yes. We just saw them try to set up the 1-3-1 for the Dragon and they lost because they got picked.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, but hang on right now, we might be seeing another fight. Bwipo.
Let's see, Bwipo actually gets pulled backwards. Not going to be enough just yet. I think that was the Jayce hammer that may have just knocked him sideways.
I fully agree with you. I think that the Baron right now is optimally set up for Fnatic, especially when they're going to be looking to teamfight, and that'll be the prime objective that they utilize to force those. But the amount of poke from Splyce scares me a lot, and I think that Fnatic have to show a lot of respect and have to have a lot of patience when they're playing around this objective.
Well, let's see how they do, because Baron hasn't spawned yet, and the game has been about pushing these towers down. 2 for Fnatic, 3 for Splyce. Rekkles is running, trying to chase down Vizicsacsi, who uses the Mercurial Hammer to knock away the threat. 220 CS for Rekkles in 19.5 minutes. He's got an Essence Reaver and a Rapid Fire Cannon, and this is the champion that he has carried many a game for. Broxah seems to be cheating to the lane where Rekkles is pushing, and we've seen Broxah invading to steal multiple buffs in a row as we now crest the 20-minute mark.
That's been the MO for Broxah all game. They knew that there was a possibility of a repeat gank on Rekkles without his flash after the package, and immediately Karthus was down there forcing everything. But Splyce, every time Fnatic make a move, they do happen to have an answer. They took the Dragon, Splyce traded it for the mid tower, everyone went bottom, they managed to get Chachi kills, so it's how will Splyce continue to react to this Fnatic team.
So I'm looking at the mini-map constantly to see where the vision is being prioritized. And you'll notice that Splyce have actually invested a lot of vision towards the bot side of the map. One of the main reasons for that was because Vizicsacsi, his goal was to push towards that tier 2. Once they noticed Fnatic starting to group up around the Baron, they immediately had to back off. So you'll notice that all the blue side vision started to get invested up towards the top side. Splyce were like, no, I have to stop this. So they immediately moved back to mid, and while they have control over the river, Fnatic still have semblance of vision around this Baron area. And Splyce, they're kind of forced into this awkward situation now where their lane assignments weren't optimal. They kind of split up all over the map. So now they're starting to regain control slowly but surely, but this is just buying more time for Fnatic.
And of course, it's going to be up to Splyce's mid-game now, moving towards the 2, 3, 4 items late-game phase to show that they can continue this great performance. During the draft, we talked about the Rek'Sai, and we asked what sort of impact it was going to have. Xerxe, 2-1-1. He's been able to get Vizicsacsi to his second item, the gigantic 55 CS. He's unlocked this Jayce, who can help to get Splyce to the next few objectives and set up this map control. And then, of course, it's going to come down to the vision, which the observers have been highlighting, showing where the teams are contesting, and Fnatic, they're regaining mid-control.
Now, one of the things we have to remember is that Fnatic wanted Splyce originally in round 1 of the playoffs. Fnatic said, oh, we can't have them, I guess we'll take Vitality. But stylistically, they felt that they were always going to be better than Splyce. And the reason for that was because they felt their mid-game was just better. It was this point in the game where Fnatic felt stronger. And it's the decision-making that Splyce now have to choose to showcase why this was a mistake for Fnatic to want to try and fight them early.
And that poke damage now needs to be on point like you were talking about, Vedius. There goes one.
All right, Sleepy Trouble Bubble. That will find Broxah. Baron's going down to half. There's a stun connecting onto Norskeren. Fnatic haven't healed away from the pit yet. They may have got the objective they wanted as the teleport's been committed. Nemesis takes a Prey Seeker to the face, and at least one of the split push threats has been pulled back.
Now, the logic from Fnatic here was that Humanoid was in the bot lane. They wanted to try and drag him up, force one of these teleports out from the side of Splyce, so they started off the Baron. But Splyce know we have a lot of poke. We can be patient. We can take our time. So they never felt the need to rush. They only TP'd in after they secured the objective, meaning that Splyce still come out on top and have one teleport left available as Kobbe just used his other one.
I was just going to point that out. It's the fact that normally in a play like that from Fnatic, like just force the TP and disengage, they got exactly what they wanted. But it's the fact that Splyce had 3 teleports on the team. They can continue to do that so many times, save for now fighting for the Infernal.
All right, the last time this Dragon was started by Splyce, Fnatic were able to use some sneakiness and sneak up from the bottom. Vizicsacsi's not with the team. He's late to the party. Dragon secured by Broxah and Fnatic. There's the flag, the drag, the dunk. Splyce have once again botched it at the Dragon. The stun onto Norskeren. That's a Drake and 2 quick kills.
Just freeze frame. You never, as a Splyce fan, want to see your team fighting on the Dragon against this type of wombo combo composition from Fnatic. Every time Fnatic are going to take that fight.
This fight was so bad for Splyce. Fnatic are now in a prime position to kick off the Baron, and there's only 3 members of Splyce alive. Xerxe still up. Can he look for a steal, or will they look for another fight?
Maybe Trouble Bubble goes into the pit as well. Oh, here comes the burst damage! It's stolen! Vizicsacsi, you hero! It is the most farmed member of Splyce. He picks up the Baron secure. Now Xerxe's looking to hunt down Hylissang. There's no support for the support of Fnatic, and he's going to try to escape. The chains will buy just a couple seconds of time, and Xerxe continues to chase, gets an unburrow, and a furious bite kills Hylissang. Splyce take Baron.
Woo! No, they don't, Trevor.
Fnatic got it.
Fnatic got Baron.
It's okay, Trevor.
It's okay.
Thank you.
It's okay.
Chachi got a kill. Chachi got a kill.
Chachi dived into the pit and got multiple kills. It was a chaotic fight. QuickShot. It happens to the best of us.
It's okay. That'll go on the highlight reel. Your career will be cursed for the rest of your life. It's fine. Shake it off.
I'm so sorry.
All right, so
Splyce with a hero kills.
when we get into the start of this fight, what you'll notice is that all of them are just grouped inside the pits, and every single one of them can eat all of this AoE damage from the side of the Jayce. Just way too much damage from the AoE from both the Zoe and the Jayce. It ends up being a clean-up fight.
And that's the best case scenario, is that Splyce were able to eliminate a lot of those Barons. And because they can continue to try to split up the map with so much mobility, they can possibly stall out this big position of power that Fnatic have. But for how much longer? This is still double Mountain on an Infernal with a 5v5 oriented composition. This is a very scary position for Splyce to be in.
It's still even gold as far as the teams are concerned, but those 3 Dragons helping Fnatic push down another tower. Also 3 items completed here for Rekkles, nearly 3 for Vizicsacsi. Splyce look to pick and choose their fights. They're continuing the split push game as they have multiple teleports, but it's really the fights around the objectives that is costing Splyce control.
Yeah, it's just funny because what Fnatic are letting Splyce do is they let them... Ooh, hang on, fight.
All right, once again, another follow-up. Bwipo decides to hold on to the Cataclysm. Not going to be able to find anything else. Splyce are able to disengage, but it's another tower to Fnatic.
Yeah, so the use of the ultimate from Sivir there was just to force Splyce back, and now as a 5-man unit, they're just sieging, they're brute forcing their way into Splyce's base. They're saying, you have to group, you have to fight us, otherwise you're going to lose everything.
3 items Sivir, as well as Double Mountain, as well as Baron empowered minions. Fnatic make the push down mid lane and get the supers.
But it's only 1 empowered recall, which is why I still like this at least option from Splyce. Like, okay, what can we at least get here? They tried to look for trading for inhib, but Fnatic smartly protected Nemesis. They got the empowered recall off, and they were able to get a member back, which meant that Chachi couldn't try to trade for the inhib and must respect.
Now I'm kind of looking at some of these items across the board and thinking like scaling, something that we've talked a decent amount about. With Fnatic in regards to their team fighting, you've obviously got the Sivir, who's now at 3.5 items, looking very poised and ready to just melt through this entire Splyce lineup. So at this point, if Splyce find themselves in a 5v5, they will lose. That is just without a doubt, that will happen. Whereas for Splyce, they actually have a lot of their poke kit ready. The 2 items have been completed for Humanoid. You now have both the Morellonomicon and the Luden's Echo, and double lethality items along with the Black Cleaver are now finished for Vizicsacsi. So if Splyce just play to their win conditions, if they just play around finding poke, looking for picks, then that is the best scenario that they want to set up for themselves, as opposed to Fnatic, who are just constantly looking to fight.
It's also just making sure that they're playing these fights a bit slower by disengaging first. Fnatic have so much hard engage tools riddled throughout their kit, so if they ever get a fight, they're going to force it, but it feels like it's been Splyce making the mistakes, allowing themselves to get engaged on. If you're going to play this type of composition, it is much more difficult to execute on, but you got to play it right in playoffs.
Yeah, unfortunately, this is a team that has shown the coordination to be on point. You can see the gold swings as the game is still close. It's 700 gold at 27 minutes. That doesn't matter. What it feels like Splyce have done well to me has been applying pressure on the side lanes. Unfortunately, Fnatic have equaled, if not bettered it, because Rekkles continues to be a threat. 293 CS helps Fnatic secure the 6th tower of the game, and his Sivir has just been used to unlock each lane. Now the same is true for Xerxe. He's just about to flame Horizon Bwipo nearly 100 CS up, and he has been the one shining light for the entire Splyce squad when it comes to really unlocking these side lanes, and Xerxe and Norskeren can try to help him with their Rek'Sai and the Tahm Kench.
Don't get me wrong, you know, Xerxe's been good, but it feels like Splyce almost just kind of forget that the composition that they're playing and what its win conditions are. It's almost like they go back to that instinct, and that's the team fight, that they're a 5v5 team, that it comes down to the clutch plays and the miracle moments. Because if you look at this game, it's really just been 2 dragon fights that have decided the entire thing. So if Splyce look back at this, the footage is fairly easy. Okay, guys, we had a 1-3-1 composition. Probably shouldn't have fought at that mountain and that infernal.
What I like about that, though, Frost, is that could be, like, even if Splyce go on to lose this game, they may try to commit a similar draft because it was decision-making around those objectives and not necessarily bigger problems. You can theorize that those problems are easier to solve between games.
Maybe, but I feel like the mental games and what we've seen from Splyce in the past is once you have one failed composition, they kind of go back to that comfort pick. It felt like Fnatic were saying, okay, we're against Splyce. Pick scaling, pick 5v5, we're just going to out-team fight them, where Splyce like, no, we'll try our new composition, our leveled up, our superior evolved form, and it just didn't work. So Splyce need to go into the mental game. Do we try to do it again, possibly go down 2 games, or do we go back to the 5v5, which is exactly where Fnatic wanted to be in the first place?
Now, while the game kind of slows down and Baron is kind of wrapping up, I feel like Bwipo is setting a really bad example for solo queue players. Given he is a 0-4 Jarvan and he's just got full damage.
Hoping you wouldn't notice that.
He's literally, like, this is not a bad Jarvan build as far as Jarvan builds go, but in the situation that he's in, his responsibility is to be a frontline, a tank, and engage. Speaking of engage, Fnatic are looking for another one.
Here comes Bwipo, gets the Cataclysm down, and there's the damage. It works out this time as Kobbe's not even able to use that flash. The Devour is used once again. Norskeren's running away with the Grey Help. Boomerang Blade shuts him down. Humanoid sidesteps. One more knocker from Bwipo. He's able to escape with the Valkyrie, but Rekkles is able to put damage on the tower. Now Xerxe is going to try and chase down. There goes Bwipo. Takes a shot from the Death Ray, and still not enough to kill Humanoid. The heal from the steps. The fountain keeps him alive. Humanoid's going to Velt forward. Gets the reply. Fnatic, you chase too far.
You tell him, Humanoid. Get off your lawn.
It ends up being a 2-for-2 right now. And Splyce, they don't actually lose any big objectives just as the Baron spawn. If they hadn't found those kills, this would have been an easy Baron secure for Fnatic, but they overstate, they overcommit, and now Splyce, they can stall out a little longer.
And I'm going to say that's also a bad example for solo queue players. Chasing for the kills when Baron's available.
But it also does give you a very clear picture of what Fnatic's mindset, mentality, and kind of momentum is behind them. If they're making crazy plays like that, that is not where you want to be for Splyce. I mean, yeah, it might feel good because less setup time around Baron, maybe they get a chance back into this game, but that's also a very confident Fnatic charging you.
All right, speaking of confidence, 2 members of Fnatic still dead. Splyce have started this one off.
Wow, don't get this one wrong,
They
Trevor.
might get
Splyce
this.
are on the Baron.
Yeah, they got it.
They've got this one secured. There's simply no contest. Splyce stay in this game. It feels like Splyce are making so many good decisions, but with this Baron and the ability to defend the pushes from Fnatic, they can regain control.
Underneath their own arrogance there, Fnatic collapsed and lost the Baron. Won't be diving that Nexus tower again.
Absolutely not. It's over-chasing, and look, all credit to Humanoid as well. He sidestepped a number of skill shots and damaging abilities to make it to Fountain, and then punished the over-eager Fnatic. It is an even gold game at 57 minutes. 3 or 4 items being picked up here, as Xerxe will get run down. Void Rush will buy some time. It's Rekkles 6, 1, and 3 right now. And he is a monster. 4 completed items.
See, I'm really upset now because I was going to do a really cool explanation of how to set up with a Baron on the enemy base, how to play a 1-3-1, and then Xerxe dies. And now Fnatic are the ones sieging onto the base of Splyce. They're the ones that have the numbers advantage. They still have, well, they've actually used a decent number of ultimates, but importantly, Bwipos is available. So Fnatic, they could just look for another engage.
Yeah, they can. And of course, Fnatic were able to find that pick on Xerxe from some more cheeky warding. They were able to get in and surprise Xerxe in his own jungle, thanks to some very good, vision wards and managing to catch him by surprise. 5, 2, and 1. Xerxe's Rek'Sai has been extremely pivotal in helping Splyce get to the point where they are, and with Baron, they can still stall this game out.
It feels like when Fnatic don't have access to the Sivir ultimate, that they're not as confident in their other hard engage tools. Because while we do talk about all of the hard engage that's riddled throughout Fnatic's composition, you did mention earlier that Splyce also have so many disengage tools, and it feels like they really rely on that Sivir movement speed to gap close so they can start landing their more targetable abilities, getting that Alistar in there, getting the Jarvan. Because right there we saw as soon as the Rekkles ultimate was gone, they're like, okay, just back off, wait for that cooldown, then we'll pop it and run them down on an elongated lane.
Okay, I need to talk a little bit more about elongated lanes, because with 7 towers killed by Fnatic, 6 for Splyce, how do these teams now regain control? This Baron feels like a tempo Baron for Splyce. It's not necessarily going to allow them to take control of the game. Mountain Drake's up in 20 seconds. That'll be followed by Elder. And how do these teams utilize either that Elder, the next Baron, to then win the game?
So, before we get into that, I just kind of want to set the scene, because the situation that both teams find themselves in right now is, as the game gets longer, it gets harder for Fnatic to siege because of the amount of damage and utility that Splyce's composition has, which means that every time they want to take the next tower, they have to fight.
Oh no.
Speaking of...
I'm going to use some of that tool. Norskeren with the Tahm Kench once again showing up, saving Kobbe's life, but it was at the cost of his flash.
So, Splyce want to avoid things like that, but basically, what Fnatic need to do is they need to be willing to commit to a fight. And what we're seeing from Fnatic is a lot of confidence, a lot of willing to make these plays. Whereas Splyce, what they need to do is just push out their waves. They need to get into a situation where they can just get some vision on their flanks to avoid Jarvan engages with the Sivir, and then they allow Vizicsacsi with the Baron to set up this kind of a play where they slowly work their way towards the enemy base. And you've also got to remember the amount of teleports and ultis they have to sneak into Fnatic's base as well.
Hold that thought. The stun manages to connect. There's not enough support just yet from Fnatic. They're going to try to chase. Bwipo picks up another BF sword, by the way. He's 2.5 items in comparison to Chachi's 4 right now. Chachi was able to brute force that inhibitor in the top lane.
But this works because there's not a big monster objective that it was available on the map for Fnatic to kind of pull, as Ender says, kind of like the gravity, it all comes around the Baron, it all comes around the Elder Drake. With these 2 monster objectives that will be spawning next time, it gets much harder for Splyce to play out this map. They need to be much more cognizant about their waves, and frankly, it's just harder for them to execute on setup versus Fnatic, which press R, run at someone, destroy them.
Especially when your press R now has a Bloodthirster as well. 5 items completed for Rekkles, 400 CS at 35 minutes. The late game Sivir win condition may be enabled, but can Hylissang make it out here? The rest of Fnatic are starting to come up. There's a teleport being committed. Vizicsacsi's going to throw down those accelerated shot bots on the side. Norskeren's being burned low. Broxah's killed in and amongst the pit. The river is now the battle scene. 1-2 quick kills for Fnatic. Requiem gets a good amount of damage down, but Fnatic are simply stronger in these 5v5s. Kobbe now forced to use the stolen flash. He's looking to get run down. Rekkles wants to cut off Humanoid. Gonna get the boomerang blade as well as the ricochet. Kill secured. Bwipo's going to start the recall, and will Kobbe be able to finish? No, he's decided to back away.
This Dragon Pit is just the Thunderdome from Splyce, and they never come out of it.
No, definitely not. Nemesis is able to pick up the kill. Look at those death timers, 46 seconds for multiple members of Splyce. Bwipo's just picked up the GA and will defend the supers in the top lane, but Fnatic are pushing into the base.
And it's one of those things where we talked about it earlier. Fnatic, they realized about halfway through the split that they were trying to do too many things. They were trying too many different strategies, and they just kind of need to go back to their roots. And again, their composition on paper seems quite bread and butter. Press the engage buttons and just go. But they're so good at doing it that it's very difficult for teams to challenge. And every time Splyce make a small mistake, Fnatic just go for the play.
Press the button and go. They're going for the win. That's a stun onto Xerxe. Double Nexus turrets down. There's simply not enough pressure. Rekkles alone should be able to finish this one off. The Nexus goes down. Fnatic press the win button.
It's just a Sivir comp, Vedius.
It's just a Sivir comp.
It's just a Sivir comp.
And the thing is, the onus was on Splyce to play towards their win conditions in this. It was... Fnatic's win condition was very obvious. It was, we want to fight, right? And the great thing for Splyce is that they found early leads, they had a strong split pusher, and they had the ability to play around the map. But unfortunately, they got baited into 2 very crucial fights, as you talked about for us, where they just fell apart, and Fnatic were able to constantly find those big fights. Rekkles ended 8-1 and 4 at the end of that game, and it doesn't matter. Every time Splyce tried to split up, it doesn't matter. Fnatic just pressed the go button, and they found those fights every time.
It's like they just They can't be something that they're not. Splyce tried to play these 1-3-1, and yeah, it worked against a team like SK that didn't have the experience, but a team like Fnatic, who just knows their win conditions, is in their pocket of exactly where they want to play. Splyce can't just try to do something that they're not comfortable doing.
And there was simply not enough pressure on Rekkles. I mean, he got yet another win, 28 wins in his 45 games on the champion. That Sivir was hugely influential. But I really, really like what I saw from Splyce. They did play the early game well. Xerxe was impactful again on that Rek'Sai. I like the lane decisions, but those dragon calls, I'm heartbroken when I see them, especially when in the same game, the same type of problem costs control.
And now the question is, how does this change in a best of 5? Are we going to see Splyce try to run the exact same type of composition, kind of the mid-game, 1-3-1, the ability to snowball off of multiple lanes, or possibly giving all of their resources to Chachi? Or are we going to see big 5v5 team fighting, scaling ADCs? Because I think that will tell a lot. That will tell Fnatic, have we broken them? Are you now forced to play our game?
We will find out later. Right now, Fnatic, they kicked off the series with a win, and for more, let's leave it to the analyst desk.
Thank you very much, guys. Indeed, very interesting win. We're also joined here by Martin Deficio Lunga as well as Ender to analyze, hopefully, 5 games. But Fnatic now on their 12th win in a row after that game. It wasn't that, I would say, clear cut in that mid-game to late game, but there were a lot of positives and there's a lot to break down. I think draft-wise, for a first game in a series, this was really exciting. We saw Splyce immediately taking a couple of risks.
Yeah, coming in, seeing the draft on Splyce's side, I was sort of skeptical, but at the same time, really looking forward to it because it did look very similar to that Game 3 draft they took last week, actually, against SK, where they went for the heavy 1-3-1 comp with the Jayce in the top lane. Of course, you can't ignore the Zoe being flexed into the bottom lane as well, which obviously isn't a pick for a lane, but on paper, this was a comp that, while it needed a snowball, was interesting to see Splyce take that perspective.
Yeah, it's kind of, again, the new generation of Splyce. We've seen this split where they're actually trying these kind of flex picks in roles you don't normally expect. If you told me last year Kobbe would be playing like Zoe bot lane, I'd be like, nope, this was the guy even in the mage meta who stuck to AD carries for most of it until he played like that one Heimerdinger game against Team Liquid. So he's not been a guy to go out of the AD carry wheelhouse very often. I think when I saw it, I was like, okay, where did they pick the Zoe and what matchup did they get when they decided to put it bot and actually give themselves a really tough matchup? It was a Corki, which didn't really scream early snowball to me in the mid lane. I thought they had something prepared against the Syndra to really punish it, but they didn't really have. It was a scaling pick instead.
I always think that's very interesting because then you have the question, yes, flex picking, it's all good and well, but you do need to end up with a comp that then works out for you and you get a good counter pick on one of the other lanes then. Did that happen here, or was it kind of flexing for the sake of flexing?
It felt like flexing for the sake of flexing, and specifically what I'm looking at is sort of what does Xerxe do in this game? Because when you see 1-3-1, you typically say you need to snowball early, but he didn't have any lanes he could realistically play around. I agree, having something powerful in mid lane that could look for kills with a Rek'Sai gank would have been very beneficial to them, but even top lane, where we did see Xerxe trying to play around, was very hard to secure a kill unless Bwipo was like hard committing to the fights, which to be fair, happened a few times.
That was a great scouting move.
Yeah.
Like, oh, this guy will always chase for the kill. Let's get something where we can kill him. Even though we are debating now, you know, the positives and negatives of the way Splyce drafted, I think ultimately it was more decisions in the game that ended up making this draft look worse in the mid game at least.
But not in the early.
Early game, it was a great start. Obviously, we had Chachi getting really far ahead top side. I like Humanoid's first play on bot side as well to secure this kill here.
Because Ender, you said it would be hard to make anything happen for Xerxe, but they get 3 kills early on. It looks great for Splyce.
It's true, they did get the kills, but the question is it ever going to be enough? Because yes, Bwipo was shut down in top lane, but you could still see him winning a lot of trades up against Chachi early on. And the difference maker for me was Splyce needed to have the ability to take turrets in side lanes, to break inhibitors, and do all that. But Fnatic had so much engaged that they just didn't really have the opportunities, it felt, to avoid the 5v5.
And I think that's probably where Splyce found some issues, and the coaching staff most likely will look at that in game 1 and say, okay, when you have 1-3-1 drafts and you're gonna lose team fights, if you're ever gonna go to objectives where you want to secure like a Drake, you don't want to go as 5 when the enemy can then also group as 5 and then go towards you, because then you actually open up for Fnatic's way to play the game, which is 5-man team fight, hard engage.
And that is what we saw exactly happening at that Infernal Drake. And at this point in time, Fnatic is behind. They haven't had their stellar early game. And then, as you see, Splyce does group up around that objective.
And look at the minimap. Jayce is coming from base. Why is this a thing? Why are you right now allowing Fnatic to say, let's group as 5 and team fight? Ideally here, you have one side lane pushing. In case if you're going Drake, you want to kind of have your top laner pushing, obviously, in with TP. Fnatic has to answer this guy or lose a turret. You then will get mid prior because they're dealing with this jayce, so I have to at least kind of respect what he's doing. Then you move a couple of guys in towards the Drake, and you can still disengage if you see Fnatic are coming towards you and just take a turret and give them Drake. In this case, their 4-man started, jayce is running from base, and Fnatic are like, well, no side lane is pushing.
Yeah,
we can group.
I think it's always tempting to talk about what went wrong in that situation. On the other hand, Fnatic, they kept their cool after that kind of bumpy early game and recognized this was their window to attack.
Yep, exactly. They did the same exact thing against Vitality just last week, where they're trying to be split push into. Fnatic realized all we have to do is draft a strong, mid to late game team fight with heavy engage, and you force these teams to fight you blow for blow around the objectives.
But this is what I really, really love about Fnatic. Your top laner went 0-3, and jayce were 100 CS up. But, we talked about this last week quite a lot, they have the option to carry from either the top side or, of course, bot lane. So when Splyce were doing this draft and the Zoe ends up bot, it's not very strong in lane, Rekkles gets a free game. And I think all of Fnatic are actually pretty calm during this game, being like, guys, Rekkles got first turret on bot side, or at least he got a solo kill, a solo turret on bot side. He's farming on Sivir. We literally just need to stall for at least 5-6 more minutes, and then this guy can carry team fights.
Yeah, I think they know that, but something we can maybe fault them for is that I think there were some questionable decisions from either side in the mid game. We're going to take a look at specifically the Baron that I feel was a very much a 50-50 moment in the end. What happens here?
There's a lot of damage in that pit onto Fnatic that hard committed for the Baron. I'm actually like Jayce coming over the wall and getting that objective ends up being a big problem for Fnatic, because I believe Jayce stole it over the wall.
He did not.
No, this is the first Baron. So
he stole a kill.
Right.
Actually, later Splyce also get a Baron.
You're right.
This is him getting the kill, and then the smite obviously comes down.
It was so confusing even for the observers.
Also, to be fair, Karthus logo, a little bit from the side, could look like a Baron.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, and I know you're mad about the point, but like,
and everything.
throwing everything.
I'm back
at
in.
Okay, you're allowed to be wrong. I know the Fisher is making you nervous because you're on the desk together.
Also, he stole my suit.
Yeah.
Whoa,
You didn't think I was
whoa.
going to show up today or what, so you just took my suit.
It's a good looking suit, man.
It is a great suit.
Hey guys, this is also an awesome graphic, so maybe let's put the attention on that and stop the giggling, because in the end, even though it went a bit up and down, it seems like Fnatic knew what was coming their way in every status of the game against this Splyce composition and struck when needed.
Yeah, it feels like Fnatic are doing this thing that they did against Vitality, where they just draft the late game and say, we're not going to show you early game Fnatic until you can prove you can come and challenge us early on. And Splyce proved that they could challenge early on, but they didn't have enough to close out against them. So Fnatic must be in a great position right now, where they continue to have almost no pressure on them.
Yeah, I feel like this is the dream setup for a team in a best of 5. Ender, you got to control it.
This is just a disaster.
But if you are a team going into a best of 5, and in the first draft, you go with the exact same style, cookie cutter, no surprise pick, no flex picking, craziness, anything. This is super, super standard. The enemy team is trying to do, 1-3-1, Zoe bot. They do get slightly ahead, but you still find some mistakes and you punish them. It just it makes Joey's job really easy. He doesn't have to go to page 2 yet. He's literally just like, well, Sivir, I guess. That's great. Let's just do that again.
But from the side of Splyce, you've basically in the first game already shown, hey, we're willing to do this, and then it doesn't work. It's always a strategy that you can take as a team, and it can go either way.
Exactly.
But now, do you think abandon ship, go for your full team fight compositions?
I think you can go for early game again. If you actually trust that kind of the issues you had setting up around Drakes will not happen again, I think you can go for, because you just showed you could actually get pretty far ahead with it. And especially Jayce plus Xerxe versus Bwipo was really great. Just give me a slightly stronger bot lane early that can actually try and hold 2v2 at least, and force Fnatic to send multiple members down if they want to punish.
Ender, you think Splyce is at least going to take some games in this series? How did they do it in game 2?
For me, I think while they can play early, their biggest strength as a team comes from Kobbe's team fighting, and I'd like to see them return more to that. So it will mean a different champion in the bottom lane for him. I'd love to see him on something like the Sivir, perhaps. But ultimately, I think step a little bit away from the split push comps that I think Fnatic are so good at playing into, and go more for the team fighting phase. It can still be a strong side laner for Vizicsacsi, but maybe not the Jayce and Hecarim instead.
Okay, fantastic. Well, we'll see what they decide to go for, but the reigning champions Fnatic are on their way towards Rotterdam.